Hi. So I'm not sure if we're actually already live. Let's wait a few seconds more. Until we're absolutely sure. Yes, I think we are. Hi. Thank you everybody for joining and for watching today. My name is Eva Lianne and I'm very happy that you are taking the time to listen to us and join us in this live session on YouTube today. So, first of all, I want to start by saying that this podcast is hosted by the Center for Ocean Policy and Economics. And today we will have a conversation with two members of the COPE working group on psychological safety, bullying, and sexual assault and harassment in the maritime sector. And on today's episode, we will focus on speaking up. Joining us today in this podcast is Miss Koni Duniya, President and founder of the Female Seafarers Association of Nigeria, FESAN, and Miss Patti Tutalo, Architect of Inclusion Strategy and an Executive Coach, and also a Women's Circles Facilitator. And me, I am Eva Lianne Veldkamp. I'm leading the COPE working group for psychological safety, bullying, and SASH in the maritime sector. And I'm also an IMO policy coordinator for the Dominica Maritime Administration. Okay, so welcome, Koni and Patti. Very happy to have you today.
Thank you, Eva. Hi, Patti.
Hi, Koni, I'm so excited that you're here because
Same here.
whenever I saw what you're doing and just the fact that you're the founder of the, how do you say it, FESAN?
FESAN. Female Seafarers Association.
Yeah, that is just amazing. And I know I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, Eva, but I do want to hear about that and like that process, because I think at some point, because I think that really weaves into the speaking up, which is our topic for today, is all about speaking up and how that, how you kind of got all that started. So Eva, I'll kick it back to you because I know you had more of an agenda and I just sort of put something out there. But I'm just excited to have you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Very exciting. And maybe we can tell our listeners that we will be talking today about how important it is to be your authentic self, and also what the different channels are for speaking up. And we will hopefully have some time left to talk about coping mechanisms and why that is important. And this podcast will be around half an hour, but we will be having this every 2 weeks. But yeah, let's first start with you, Koni. Could you please tell us more about the things you are doing in Nigeria?
Okay, so post 2019, where there was the huge call for women empowerment participation in the maritime industry. I had sailed. I went to sea in 2005 and left in 2014, and since then I've been like in shipping administration, away from seafaring. Didn't have a clue what was happening there, And 2019, when that call was made, that was a new mother. I didn't have any plans of going back to sea, but that really got me thinking, given my own experience, and I'm wondering. And I hear a lot of girls from Nigeria going to sea at this point in time. And I'm wondering what their experiences are like and what it would look like. And I know for sure, sometimes just having someone to talk to can go a long way in terms of even coping, maybe jumping the gun here. But so it's one of those things that I decided to just call on a few friends that are still actively in seafaring and asking about the females, because I didn't know how many there were out there. And I started a WhatsApp group, shockingly. Before you know it, it was almost 200. I didn't anticipate that much number. And, and I believe in data. So a lot of, I started, throwing out surveys and just to sort of gauge where we are and maybe where we should be going. and realize a lot of them are still at the infancy age of cadetship. We have some that have graduated, but are not yet working because they just can't access jobs. Because again, typically here, in terms of even job offers, there is still discrimination, sadly. And then I think the shocking one was the set of girls that have gotten the COC, but couldn't get a job and the COCs have expired. I think that was the saddest one for me. And basically that's where the advocacy conversation started. So with female seafaring, it's a whole lot. So you're looking at the discrimination for employment, you're speaking up in that space, and really where we can just let people know that women can do it, because there's that notion of, oh, can you cope? How will you, it feels like some of the employers see you as a burden, and a burden they don't want to deal with. So they rather just not have you anywhere. But we're not backing up. We're still pushing and really trying to open doors. We've started to venture outside of the shores of Nigeria and just speaking to companies. And I know a lot of companies are now really big on diversity and inclusion. We try to be in those spaces where those conversations are happening and just raise a hand and say, yes, we have qualified females here if you're looking to employ. But again, one of the barriers we've also seen is recruiters wanting seafarers with, what do you call it? Experience, post-cadetship experience. But if I'm fresh out of school and nobody gives me a chance, then where will I get that experience? So those are really the real part of the real issues we're dealing with. And but the big one for me really is the fact that we started to lift the veil on harassment and bullying, especially against females. And sometimes you hear people say, oh, well, those topics are too sensitive. You really shouldn't be talking about it. And I say, well, but that's why we should be talking about it, because it's been too sensitive for too long. And that's why it still exists. And I think it's a very shameful thing. And for lack of a better word, it's a bit barbaric that it's still happening, And again, when I do surveys within the girls, the results come back and it's clear that it's still happening. Well, I think one thing that really gave me joy one certain time is when one of the girls said she went on board. And some of the men were saying that, oh, don't try them. They have this group that will come after you if you try them. So I think if not for nothing, we've done something, just raising the awareness more and more against harassment and bullying. So the work, it feels like it's endless. Sometimes you want to give up because it can get tiring. But then when you see how a young girl is so enthusiastic about seafaring career and a career in the maritime industry, it just keeps you going, because it has been good for me. I've had a wonderful career, and you can only dream the same for another young person. So for me, that's what's really kept us on and kept us going as a group.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining us today and speaking up about this exactly. This is exactly why we want to do this podcast, and I think I can totally agree with you, and I'm also on the same page. I had also a good experience in the maritime sector on board of ships myself, and I really want to have others having that same experience, and I think we all do. So let's go back to our first topic of today, because it related to much of the things you already mentioned. So the first question I wanted to raise is, why is it important to be your authentic self, and how does this relate to feeling safe enough to speak up? And what I think is the interesting part of this is that when you are talking about bullying and sexual assault and harassment, you tend to focus on the things that happen, right? The bullying itself. But what goes before it is the psychological safety. So maybe, Patti, can you tell us something about that part, like being able to be your authentic self, and how it relates to psychological safety exactly.
Yeah, this part about prevention versus reaction, I think is really key. And um, this has been coming up, ironically, a lot for me this past week or two, where I've talked to several women, and not always in maritime industry, but also in the male-dominated industries, where they say they have two different ways of showing up. So they show up at work with like one mask on, so to speak, and then they go home and they put a different face on. And maybe the one at home hopefully is more authentic to who they are, but in their environment, they can't be wholly who they are. And so, yeah, I think that when it relates to like the continuum, showing up exactly who you are at work means that you feel safe enough to be your authentic self. Let's not wait until, the harassment, everything is so, because what happens, right, on the continuum is something happens where somebody says something to you, you feel like you have to dress a different way because of what the harassing comment was, or you have to change your voice because they said you sounded too girly or whatever. So you have all of these little things that keep hitting you, and then eventually it turns into something bigger and bigger. So yeah, I just I'd love to get your thoughts, Koni, on that, because I think what you're doing is you're starting to break away at that, but you're also providing a space for, through your organization, for women to be themselves. And I love that. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think for me, I would love to say it's better to preach zero tolerance to start with. So it starts from the organization, right? And just jumping the gun again, I think one of the responses from the mini survey I did with the girls, one responded to say that, oh, it's surprising that in one company they had the bullying and harassment, anti-bullying policy in the office, but they didn't have it on board, like pasted on the wall. So, I mean, zero tolerance towards bullying and harassment for me is important, because it's the only way that will make, for me, feel safe on any vessel I ever step my foot on. Because if there's zero discrimination, zero bullying, zero harassment, then I really don't have any reason not to be myself, right? And if I'm my authentic self, so you see now, first for me to be my authentic self, the environment has to be safe. I have to feel safe enough to be my authentic self, because if the environment doesn't feel safe, then you start to build layers of, you start to put up a facade, you start to put up a personality that you think maybe fits into that environment more. Then being your authentic self might be a danger to you, depending on who you are, right? So you start to maybe make adjustment. And again, that's part of coping mechanism, where you sort of adjust to the environment as opposed to just being yourself. So I think the fundamental in this is that first, employers need to make the vessels and workplace safe enough for people to be their authentic self. Because when you're your authentic self, when something is not right, immediately you will spot it. And I don't think there's anybody that wakes up and say, oh, this is not right, but I won't say anything about it, right? There's something that is making you not to say anything about it. But if the environment is safe, then definitely, if something is wrong, then you immediately notice it and do the needful. Yeah, so to be your authentic self, the environment has to be safe.
Yes, I think that very much makes sense. And I think that your story is relatable to a lot of us. I think maybe to all of us, right? Because I think we can all recognize, like, putting on some kind of mask sometimes and acting like you're somebody else within a group to make yourself feel more safe. And I think that goes to our like third questions, like about coping mechanisms, because I think that is a coping mechanism, right, Patty, that you are coping with dealing a potential unsafe situation and then adapting yourself. So how so the question actually is, how can being open help with this, or what other things we do to prevent this, or to solve this, to make it better?
Okay, I think I'll go first. So really, again, back to a typical setting on the ship, you as an individual, how much can you really do? Again, if you're not the master of the vessel, or maybe the chief officer of chief engineer, what can you really do? Um, I think I talk about this a lot. You really cannot disconnect the company from the environment. So I think it's the company's responsibility really to provide a safe environment. And then when that happens, then being your authentic self now means that you look after yourself, right? And you're cautious of your safety. I mean, typically on board, you're responsible for your safety. But you see, the company provides you a safety boot, for instance. You're not supposed to go with your regular shoes on deck, or maybe when carrying out an activity. And that's why they provide you a safety boot. That's why they provide you the harnesses, the hard hat, the coveralls. So all these gears are provided for you to keep yourself in a safe manner when going out to work. So if you can do that for my physical and external body, then why not do that for the internal and then for my mental state? So provide a safe environment, and then I take up the responsibility of being safe and making sure that whatever I do does not compromise my personal safety. Yeah.
That's a good one. And that's actually things you can do, right? And so maybe we can talk about, elaborate that on that a little more, because I think that's a very good example and comparison, right? So because when you have a speaking up culture on board of your vessel, like it's not only the company but also the leadership on board, for example the
Absolutely.
captain, or you know, but also just colleagues amongst each other. If you can then be open enough to talk about things like, "Ooh, I was not feeling completely safe the other day because this and this remark was made and it made me feel really uncomfortable." You know, you can say that to one person, and then maybe that person can help you the next time when you're in that
Situation.
potential situation. Yeah, so that's just an easy thing everybody can do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes me think of that allyship where you really have to find people who are in your court. So even if your voice, because sometimes in these environments, our own voice isn't enough, and we need other people to amplify that voice. So if I said something and then Eva said it and then Koni, you said it, it's like, it's much more powerful than just one person saying it. So I think speaking up is not just individuals speaking up, but really get the masses together, and and the impact that you can have is so much greater. And the masses don't have to be all the women. I mean, that's the thing, is like the allies, some of my greatest allies during my career, and I'm sure you guys are the same way, has been men, that, you know, they're the ones that speak up and amplify. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a powerful tool, right? I think that's such a powerful tool, just to see each other as human beings first, you know,
Yeah.
and not make such a big distinction as to whatever it is, like gender, culture, even shoe size. I don't know. You can compare each other on many different ways, but why do we always tend to do that? It's just, if you see each other as not a human being, if you're like helping each other, being part of a team, I think that's just a basic thing that everybody can start with today, right?
I have another thing, Eva, real quick. And Koni, I want to go back to something you said, because I thought it was really, really, really cool when we talk about coping mechanisms. You mentioned that you started a WhatsApp for just to connect with other female seafarers, and it quickly rose to, what'd you say, over 200 people, like very fast. And I've seen similar things happen where, you know, women, they find each other, and we find our tribe, so to speak, you know, people that really, really we can connect with and relate to. And that is also, I think, a coping mechanism, because there's often times whenever we are in these experiences and we can't change it in that moment. And so either we cry every day in our in our in our bunks, or we, you know, which is a way to cope. But I think one of the things that we can do, especially as women, is we can connect with other women and know that they've got you, they're holding you, and we're supporting each other as we go through these terrible experiences. And again, they're not all like that, but in that moment, and what I've found is I almost gain a new perspective on the situation, to where it maybe isn't as terrible as I originally thought. And so I just wanted to kind of say, like, while it's a coping mechanism for us all to connect, it's also a way to gain perspective and to gain your own power back and your strength back. So that's another reason why I absolutely love what you're doing, because you're bringing all the women together to support each other.
Yeah. Thank you, Patti. And I think for me at the beginning, I said, look, I've been at sea, and our family members love us. Our friends love us, but if they've never been at sea, some things they just can't relate and they can't understand. So why not create a safe environment where young girls and women feel safe to interact and really talk about key issues. And occasionally we'll just pick up these issues and talk about it in depth. And like you said, for some people it's an eye opener, because maybe they've been, there has been a wrong perception of certain things maybe that they've experienced. So, I mean, conversation helps, and we keep it going.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, that's just the most wonderful thing to hear, right? And thank you very much for doing that for everybody, I think. And so the last question of our list for today, and we're closing into to half an hour or so, was that maybe, Koni, you can tell us something about your group, and your so the Female Seafarers Association of Nigeria, FESAN, and some of the things you got back from your mini survey around this topic. Maybe you can tell us something about that, or, you know, what your general takeoff is from the people who are inside of that group, and what you think is important relating to, you know, this topic.
Okay, so I mean, I did a mini survey and I had about 70 responses. And indeed here, the first one says, have you ever witnessed or heard about bullying and harassment on board the ship? I have 71 responses, which again is quite huge. And about 57% of the respondents say that the companies they had sailed with have anti-bullying and harassment policies. Almost everyone says they are happy to, they're aware of the channels for reporting, and then on which the majority is the master head of department on the ship, or the DPA of the company. And then we have some mentions of East One, again, just showing an appreciation of what East One is doing as well. And almost everyone says they're happy to speak up if they witness anybody being bullied, or if they're bullied or harassed, they're happy to speak up. And yeah, so really, it's a good thing to know that the young girls are happy to speak up if this really happens. But again, it goes back to the foundation that it's not just speaking up, what happens after you speak up. Because if you speak up and maybe you're victimized, or like in the allyship case, you speak up for somebody and you get victimized for it, and the next time you probably will just walk past if you witness anything, as opposed to speaking up. So beyond speaking up, what happens afterward, I think, is really critical to ensure that people continue to feel safe to speak out.
Yes, that's a very important, very, very important remark I think you make. And thank you for sharing that mini survey. It's so good to know that people feel safe enough to speak up. But as you said, and maybe we can very quickly tell something about victimization, because in my belief, that is something. So you have a root cause being in a like psychologically unsafe situation, and
Yeah.
then the effect of this is that bullying and assault and harassment taking place, right? So then you have a victim, right? Someone is being bullied. And I think in most cases, what the awareness goes to what is happening to that person. And then the consequences for that person can be quite severe, right? So they're already are being bullied or harassed, and then on top of that, they're being blamed, maybe they have to leave their ship, maybe they will even lose their job because of it. And I think what then ultimately happens is that not only the person, the victim is victimized again and again, but also there is no focus left on the psychologically safe and toxic maybe working environment that this which was the root cause.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I have an interesting perspective to this, because I say for one victim that doesn't feel safe. So I imagine that one victim on the bridge of the ship, maybe with a watchkeeper keeping watch, but then that person is saddled with the responsibility of keeping everybody else on the ship safe. But then that one person is not safe themselves. So by harboring the abusers and the bullies, basically the owner of the ship is saying that person, the bully or the harasser, is more important than the lives of all the other people on the ship. Because if I'm in charge of a watch and everybody is sleeping and I don't feel safe, if anything happens, then there is life at stake, the environment is at stake, and even the assets of that company is at stake. So, I mean, for ship owners, it's of interest, it's money in their pocket, it's of interest to ensure that everybody on the ship is safe, so that these vessels are navigated safely from one port to the other, and they make money, everybody is happy. And then we keep the environment safe, because then we don't harm the environment by accidents. And ultimately, human beings are also safe, because you have people paying attention to the job properly and doing the job well, and then everybody is safe. And the whole industry is happy when there are no accidents at sea, right?
Yes, I think we can all agree.
I mean,
Yes.
that's why I feel it has to be a collective effort, because there is something in it for everybody. If seafarers are safe, feel safe at sea.
That's totally true. And I think, be a process or a chain is only as strong as the weakest link, right? So if you take care of everybody within your team, everybody, don't leave anybody out, be a true ally, then yeah, I think you're right. Then everybody is happy and also safe. And I think that's a wonderful goal, right?
Absolutely. And that's how we should maybe start coining the conversation. It's really looking at what's in it for me. For the ship owner, you have your asset to protect. I mean, for even IMO and the rest of the industry, you want to protect the environment, right? And then for people, you want people to be safe. So it's a chain reaction, and it just says that it's everybody's duty to ensure that every seafarer feels safe at sea.
Yes, that's a very nice closing remark for today, I think. Thank you so much, Koni, and also thank you so much, Patti, for joining us today. And I hope to all the listeners that the information that we shared was beneficial to you and that you learned something. And we very much look forward to doing these podcasts more often. So thank you everybody for all of your great energy and efforts today. And we look forward to talk with you more about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.